Budget Committee meeting to order. My name is Carl Gay, and I'd like to do, as chair of this committee, I'd like to go ahead and do a roll call. Gino Grimaldi is out. Also, Gary Wallish. Here. Susan Cox. Here. Linda Lynch. Pete Knotts. Here. Charlie Conrad. Here. Kelly Sutherland. Here. Darvin Fowler, I heard was going to join us online, so we'll look out for that. Lawrence Green here. Michelle Weber. Here. And Heather Murphy. Here. Great. I just wanted to acknowledge that one of our budget committee members, Jason Williams, passed away earlier. Oh, I'm sorry, Stephen. Oh my God, I mixed up. Yeah. Stephen Willard passed away, and we express our condolences for him and or for his family. Michelle Weber would like to say a few words, so please go ahead.
Thank you, Carl. Yes, when I was asked if I had any recommendations for a Springfield representative to join this committee, the first person immediately jumped to my mind was Steve Wheeler. As a former city manager, he brought obvious and well-rounded skill sets to help, guide the conversation. What I'm going to miss most about Steve in both my personal life and my work life is just his kind, thoughtful presence in our community and in meetings, and he just was such an amazing person, and really sad to see him no longer here.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for those comments. And with that, we will move on to public comment. Just checking with the board administrator, is there anyone signed up for public comment?
We do not have any public comment this evening.
Great, thank you very much. And I want to acknowledge that Darvin is here with us online. Hi, Darvin. Great. We'll go ahead and move to the next, get to remarks from our CEO and chair, Jameson Otten.
Well, thank you for joining us tonight. It's a good night. In front of you, you'll have the draft of our long-range financial plan, our community improvement plan, where our community investment plan, rather, where we make investments in the community, but also maintain the assets that we already have. It is odd times, interesting times, both at the federal level and at the state level. We acknowledge that as well. Interesting for us, as you know, we're in a sanctuary state, so our federal funding was in question a few months ago. There's a federal injunction in place that allowed us to access our federal money for capital dollars. We do recognize that if something should change in that ruling and that be lifted and would be required to comply with the current certifications and assurances at the federal level, that we would not be able to accept federal dollars, and that would put us at risk for different capital projects. And we use some of that money for operating costs as well. So we acknowledge that risk as we move into this season. So I want to thank you for your eyes and your insights on these documents in front of you. And with that, I will turn it back to the chair.
Thank you very much. I actually have no comments for this meeting today, so we'll go ahead and go straight to the budget planning overview. Yeah.
Hello, welcome. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Pam Strutz. I am formerly the finance director, now the CFO, and I'm very happy to be here and presenting this information to you tonight. We would like to start by going over our budget process, which should be the next slide there, yeah. So our budget process actually starts with this meeting in November. And this is the first meeting of the budget committee. And then we prepare our regular budget along with the two documents that you'll see tonight. And that meeting then will occur in March 31st. This is a little bit different schedule than what we had last year, because we are trying to move our budget schedule up a month. For the last 2 years, we've approved our budget in June, but we have a new schedule where we will be actually approving the budget in May. So just put that on your calendars. March 31st will be our next meeting when we get together here. The public hearing will be in mid-April at the budget, or at the board meeting again. And then May 20th will be our adoption of the budget. So then I am going to turn it over to Joe McCormick, who will start us out by reviewing the community investment plan, the CIP.
Great, thank you. Good evening. Good to see you guys again. Joe McCormick, Chief Development Officer. Your work tonight helps provide transparency and accountability in how LTD plans and prioritizes capital investments. Tonight we invite you to review and question and provide feedback on this draft plan. I'm saying draft, not preliminary, because I go all over the place. So I'm saying draft plan. Right? We're looking for input and comments on the overall direction, priorities, and new project concepts you see this evening. Next slide, please. We're going to review the framework of the plan, the guiding principles that are in our adopted CIP policy. Then I'm going to highlight a few projects that have been completed or are underway, many of which this committee approved in the last budget cycle. And then we're going to review several new projects, share some updates on the funding strategy, and then open it up for questions. Sound good? Next slide, please. So the CIP is LTD's 10-year roadmap for investing in vehicles, facilities, technology, and infrastructure that support safe and efficient and equitable transit service. It connects short-term needs and long-term goals, ensuring the alignment with regional mobility priorities and LTD's mission, vision, and values. The adopted policy provides a framework for project development, vetting, and then the eventual adoption by the board of directors. Next slide, please. Projects are evaluated against guiding principles to ensure the investments are safe, financially sustainable, impactful, and resilient. The overall list of projects hasn't changed much since the board adopted them back in June. Updates to this draft plan include some revised budget timelines, budget numbers themselves, new project proposals, and a refreshed look at our funding strategy that takes advantage of some new grant opportunities. Next slide. A few recent projects demonstrate progress and purpose behind this plan. Eugene Station modernization reopened in January with upgraded restrooms, improved wayfinding, a new customer service counter, and enhanced employee facilities. And after 27 years since the station first opened to the public, this was a very welcome and celebrated refresh of the facility. All 10 new diesel replacement buses are now in service as of September. And work is underway to replace the fleet's mobile video system, enhancing safety for riders and operators. This project leverages the fixed asset surveillance project that was completed a couple of years ago and the new operations command center, which then helps us efficiently dispatch resources. The command center, which is in its closeout phase right now, was completed on time and under budget, while operations continue uninterrupted for the past 12 months. Next slide, please. Some additional efforts include an investment in improved bike share infrastructure, working to integrate those services into LTD's mobility services, the installation of a bus maintenance platform and crane for safe overhead service of vehicles. That will actually kick off in January. And this fall, we started a bus stop accessibility and assessment to guide future improvements, which is right now a key focus area for the FTA. And development of a fair technology roadmap for seamless travel across all LTD services, which we'll present to the board in January. Next slide. A few new initiatives in the plan include a dedicated paint and body facility to improve repair turnaround. This is specialized work that a third party currently does, which we'd like to do on site to reduce vehicle maintenance downtime. A radio communications modernization for reliability and interoperability with our jurisdictional partners. A fluid management system replacement and fleet maintenance for better tracking and compliance. And a longer-term project of Eugene Station roof replacement, which will be ending its experience near life in about 10 years. So those are just a handful of the new ones. Next chart, or next slide, yeah. I'm just going to point out a couple things on these lists. We'll have plenty of time to ask questions on everything here. You got something in particular, but I'm just going to note a couple items. Under the improvements list, you'll notice that the current year is forecasted to be about $2.5 million under. This is primarily due to the timing of the federal Attain grant for an on-demand service for the Bethel area. Our next significant capital construction project would be the expansion of the Right Source facility, which houses LTE's paratransit operation and brokerage call center. Funding for this expansion still needs to be identified. We're also holding $5 million to contribute to the City of Eugene's Franklin Boulevard rebuild project, which stretches from Walnut Station to Dad's Gate on East 11th Avenue. Could you move 2 slides ahead, please? Under the state of good repair, you'll note the largest reinvestment continues to be LTE's fleet, representing about 3/4 of the plan's overall value. So those are just a couple of my highlights. I'm going to toss it over to Jack here. Move 2 more slides for me. And Jack's going to walk through the funding strategy. And then we'll open it up for questions.
Hello, and I'd just like to also thank you for taking the time to join us tonight. This is my first time speaking with several of you, so I'd like to take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Jack Ramsey, and I'm the grants administrator here at LTD. I come to LTD from Northern Nevada, where I worked in grants for the Fallon Paiute Shoshone tribe. I spent the first 10 years of my career in software sales, but decided to pivot and commit my time to public service. I chose to join transit because I believe in equitable access to resources. Transit helps us get to school and doctor's appointments, but it also enables economic mobility, and I wanted to be part of that. As Joe mentioned, the Community Investment Plan is how LTD implements community priorities through collaborative projects. My role is finding funding for those projects and making sure that we are good stewards of those public funds. Community Investment Plan projects fall into 2 categories: improvements, which includes adding new services or facilities, and state of good repair projects, which serve to maintain our existing assets like buses, stations, so they can perform at the level called for in the original design. Funding details for improvements can be found on page 16. A few examples of those projects include our new trip planner, which will enable riders to coordinate available transportation options, including transit and cycling. Funding details for our state of good repair projects can be found on page 17. It shouldn't come as a surprise that our largest project is replacing buses that have met or exceeded their useful lives. The useful life of a bus is 500,000 miles or 12 years, whichever one comes first. Funding comes to LTD from the state and federal levels and is provided through 2 types of funding: formula funds and discretionary funds. Formula funds are calculated based on criteria like population, revenue, miles, income levels, population density, and they're designated for specific services like planning, design, capital investments, mobility management for seniors and disabled folks. And discretionary funds are available on a competitive basis. Applications are evaluated based on their merits, and awards are made accordingly. We just recently submitted a letter of interest for a discretionary program that will expand service to rural veterans to make sure they can make their healthcare appointments. With that quick overview, I'll turn it back over to Joe.
Yeah, thanks. So happy to take questions. I will note many hands made this plan, and they're mostly sitting behind the committee tonight. So we've got a lot of support answering whatever questions may be.
Great. Thank you very much for that presentation. Looking around the room, what questions we have? I'll start with yeah, so I'll do Charlie, and I saw Gary, and then Susan.
Appreciate it. So I'm looking on the first page of the very nice, long, big sheet. The regional mobility technology, so you said that the budget is about 2.5 under the budget. And it looks like about 2 of that's gonna be that regional mobility enabling technologies. Did that 2 million just get moved to 27, or was that two? Okay.
Pushed out, yeah, just waiting for the funding.
Is there any reason why the original budget of 2.5 got moved, by 2 million, why it got pushed out a year?
Have the specifics on that.
So we kept, sorry, Dave Roth, Director of Planning. So we kept 500,000 in FY 26, is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think just in case the funding does show up in 26, we kept some in 26. That, I'll answer the question.
No, maybe I didn't. Probably I didn't ask it very well. So I'm looking at, there's 2.5 here.
Yep.
2 got moved to there. So if we originally budgeted and passed 2.5 in 26, what happened with that project to move that 2 million on to another year? Were there delays in there? Was there delays in funding?
The delay in funding, so we're still waiting for our agreement to come through with FHWA. So we retained $500,000 in 2026 so that we could start spending those dollars if they do show up.
So the scope of the project, all that kind of thing is still the same?
The scope remains the same, it's just a delay in getting started. Yeah, the tank grant.
So this is a grant that we got through Federal Highway that was announced a year ago, I want to say. And had to go back through federal review to make sure that it aligned with the current administration's focus. We did get word from FHWA that it had been approved, but it's been slow to land. So we put some money in here in case it does trickle through this year. That's what they've said.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Gary, no. Lawrence Hub. Explain that to me. The question came up in my mind when I saw that, read that, is I didn't think Florence was in our district.
It is. Well, it's not in our taxing district.
There,
Right. So we work across the county, and that is a project that would create better user amenities in Florence. There's several services that connect, and they kind of connect in a parking lot of the Safeway, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. So right now,
Existing,
multiple transit services come together in a very informal and not very user-friendly way in Florence. And so this is actually a project that was identified in Florence's transportation system plan. And we're working with the city of Florence, and we would be using statewide dollars to fund the project, so not local payroll.
Okay, yeah, because I know that you've got the Yachats and you've got the Coos Bay, and getting that all together, and it makes really good sense to tie it to Eugene, because, you know, going back and forth. And, but it's just, that's what I was wondering. So it's not part of our taxing district.
Right, no payroll taxes collected in the district.
Exactly, that's what I understood.
Thank you. Thank you there. Susan?
I was actually pointing to them.
Oh, okay. If there aren't any other questions, I have some questions. Lawrence,
I would have questions.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Okay, great. I have a question about River Road Station disposal. I thought we were renting that from ODOT, but it sounds like we actually own it.
Yeah.
I think I just remembered that. Could you refresh all our memories about our history with that property?
Yeah, so LTD acquired that from actually the county about a decade ago now. And we have since moved up that operation to the Santa Clara. And so we're trying to sell that property. And so what you see listed here, it's really the expense of just securing the property during this time period that we're trying to sell it. Yeah, that's the pretty small dollar value. It's a little outside of the normal operation. So that's why we put it in the plan here. Okay, yeah, great.
Thank you.
Relative to that, this is back, Carl, when you were on the board. I was approached on that piece of property by the state of Iowa. They were very interested in it. And I guess that interest has gone away. But they were quite interested at that time. Franny.
Yeah.
Franny hit me with that. She says, you know, if you guys ever want to get rid of that, she says, we'd like to look at that. Because at that time, they were going to lose their position over in Springfield, District 2. Yeah,
We've had a few interested parties, and we've had a lot of discussion with ODOT, but folks don't have the money in ODOT to buy it, so.
I think that's where I got the narrative that I think in my mind, if we did sell it to ODOT, I was like, it's going to on. Good, Charlie.
Thank you. So the next question I've got, it was mentioned, pulling the bus paint body shop, instead of contracting out, pulling it in. I'm just curious on the personnel cost side of that and absorbing the personnel and the ongoing cost to staff that. Is it going to be staffed with existing resources and it's just the physical structures that are coming in, or is that going to be a build out of brand new program, brand new facility?
I'm Mike Hirsch, Chief Operating Officer. We would likely add a paint and body specialist. It would pay back tremendously in reliability of service, because right now we have to have a couple buses sent to typically an RV body shop, and the body shop has to buy the parts. So there's a long lead time and handle plant paying industry street rate. So even with our excellent benefits and union work, it would be same expense, probably less expense, but certainly much better for the passengers to have availability of buses. 1 or 2 staff that would be specialized in paint and body.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If I can ask a additional question, this would be an additional building, new building.
The first thing we would do is study what our best options are. I have installed paint booths in my career in the past, and they can get very environmentally permit heavy. So we would ask our planning folks to help us figure out where's the best location for it. Ideally on the Glenwood campus, but we'd be open to what we can build the quickest and most economical.
Okay, thank you. That was very helpful, because I in my mind, I thought it was going to be for sure on the Glenwood campus. So could be to be determined.
Yeah, we know for a fact that there, as an example, there's a auto parts lot just a block away that's currently closed. All that would have to work out on what type of money do we get, what money when they able to be paid for, what can we build with that flavor of money.
Right.
And obviously proximity to here would be important, ideally on site, right, because.
Good, thank you. Just make sure, Darvin, I know you're online and I can't see you, so make sure to speak up if you have, oh, I guess I could see you. If you have a question, please let me know.
Will do, thank you.
Looking around for any other additional questions?
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. And I would encourage you to look into that on the paint booths. I built a facility with 7 of those. And you understand some of the issues.
Yes, sir.
There may be one. Because it was an experience.
Yep.
Yeah, very much. Could you help me understand the mobilization with the bike share and that type of thing? It's quite different than we were involved. We were on the board when that first came out, and we had a long discussion on that. And what is the role that LTD is playing?
So we're moving into a role of what we call regional mobility manager. Part of it is bus service. The other part of it is services that we don't necessarily run. You'll recall that LCOG handles some of the rural services. We have bike share. We have a big investment in bike paths. There's an investment in pedestrian as well. So our role is looking at to make sure that system connects. How does it connect for the first last mile from the bus, the bike to the bus or walking to the bus, making sure those are coordinated well, making sure that the public understands what exists for them, whether we directly operate it or not. Dave can go into further detail on that, but that's the gist of it. We want to make sure that the bike system is modernized, that there's pedal assist bikes, those types of things.
And those you're talking about
getting
electric base, which is probably a good idea.
Yeah.
I know we were worried about the fact that it would utilize a lot of our resources in terms of our talent.
Sure.
To get real involved in that bike share thing, and maybe it's way developed beyond what we were looking at.
Yeah, they have their own operations. And they handle all those pieces. Ours is to look at the connections and see how we can facilitate more use of that in conjunction with the services that we offer.
You're not moving bikes back and forth.
No, the main goal is to improve congestion and air quality goals.
Thank you.
One last question.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Moving on to the page with the tiers, and this might just be, something that didn't get changed. But for the rear-facing ADA secure equipment upgrade, it's listed as a 3. My understanding is 3 is that funding has been identified, but there are a number of dollar amounts for the grant funding next to it. That should be a 2 or a 1 instead of 3, or the 3 for specific focus that not recognizing.
Charlie, can you see which line you're on?
Rear-facing ADA securement upgrade. It's listed as a 3. In the middle of the page.
So I can speak to that. Yeah, honestly, I should have updated that.
Oh,
Yeah, it's a 1. It's actually something that we moved on pretty quickly because, it's a safety issue.
thank you.
I've got a couple more questions, but I just want to make sure.
Okay, you go ahead, I'll continue now.
Oh, I'll ask my next question, which is, I was wondering if there were any new innovative fare collection methodologies that you've investigated to see. I'll be more clear with my question. I've always been worried about the cost of trying to recover fares in relationship to what we actually collect. And I feel like we're on the cusp of just like kind of reading news articles and just seeing there might be some new ways to improve that. Just wanted to hear your opinions and thoughts on that and what the future is holds for that.
Yeah, good question. We're working on that right now, asking those questions and looking at what's out there. Dave and his team are just wrapping up, developing a roadmap for us to chat with the board about in January that presents a bunch of options, balancing those costs. We know we've got infrastructure both on platform and on bus that are coming up in terms of the end of useful life and supported by those manufacturers. So we've got some hardware issues, but we also wanted to, back to the mobility management thing, be able to develop and invest in a back-end system that can facilitate and reduce friction between a passenger going from one mode to another, one service to another. So that's what we're going to talk with the board about in January.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't bring a copy of that roadmap this evening, but if there's anything else you want to add to that, Dave?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great summary. I think you'll start to see some pieces fall into place here, and there's a lot of interconnectedness. So the release of the transit app, which actually allows for direct mobile payments to be incorporated or integrated with our future fare payment system. And I think all of us are keenly aware of how easy it is to go buy a cup of coffee now. You can just tap your phone or your credit card on the device and pay for your coffee that way. You're paying for your transit fare should be just as simple as that. And so we are moving forward on this roadmap. The strategic planning committee will get a bit of a preview about this next week, and then we'll bring the larger report back to the board during that January. And that'll give us and the board and the SBC pretty clear direction on where we want to go.
Very good. Thank you very much. So it's not a CIP item yet because the board needs to review. So
Actually, that subject matter is a CIP item. It's fare systems under the tech and infrastructure.
Oh, okay.
So there's a budgetary number there that'll get refined depending on how we pursue that roadmap.
James, Chair, if it's of interest to this committee, when we meet next, we could give an update on that very topic. If you've interest.
That would, I guess I'm speaking for me, it would be interest for me, and then would the rest of the board members be interested as well? You don't have to spare my feelings. Their stunned silence would indicate yes, James. So yes, so please, that would be great for the next time. I'll have more questions and I'll release Gary on you all. On page 29, the reserves, I think it says page 29, there's these red boxes that I lost it. Let's get this, no, sorry, page 29, the small packet.
Yeah, and I'm gonna go.
Oh, later, okay.
I will go over those.
Okay, wait, I'll wait. I was gonna say like, hey, I wanted to make sure. Okay, I'm gonna hold on to that. Gary, go ahead.
Yeah, you indicated in here, and I know that last time we met, we talked about the electric buses and whatnot. Is that looking any better? Or is it, well, it's just, I saw that you're picking up some more diesel
Yes,
rigs and whatnot, and I know that, at one time the board said we're gonna go all electric.
yes.
And obviously now we have a whole lot more experience to make that decision. And, but I just wondered, those electric buses you have, oh, what was it? 11, 12, you've got quite a few. 30, and are you, I assume you're using them.
We are, not as much as we'd like to. Right now, part of the series of those electric buses is on recall. We can only charge them 75% of their capacity. Beyond that, you know, we have range issues, unreliability issues with those to begin with. Variable factors determine how far they can go on a charge. And we're in the process right now of trying to ship some of those to LA Metro in time for the Olympics. We have bought diesel buses, but we use renewable diesel, which is 99% renewable, fryer grease, if you will. And what we've realized is the number one indicator for us for meeting climate goals is to increase ridership and go after mode change, regardless of whether it's an electric bus or a diesel bus. Bus manufacturing in the United States has been problematic. I believe there's 3 manufacturers now. We were down, one just came back. So your lead time on these vehicles has stretched out real far. The price has gone up 2x and the unreliability still exists. So we had a conversation with this board and gave them the reality of our experience. And we're attempting to reduce the percentage of battery electric buses in our fleet and go back to a reliable technology, which has a bad reputation and it earned years ago because diesel is now much cleaner than it used to be.
So there may be a need for those someplace.
Yes.
And
Los Angeles.
Your idea, I mean, that was what I was looking for is, you know, if it's not working well here, is there a place how you can help yourself in okay.
Yeah, exactly. And we're having those conversations with our federal delegation. Of course, there are some efforts made to procure some of those vehicles. So we have those conversations when we talk to our DC friends, and they're processing the experience, but we're very honest. We can't change what the experience
They are what they are.
They are what they are.
But it just indicates we're in that particular class, we're still in the experimental stage because we were,
yeah.
I know when I was in Atlanta, we talked about 250, 300 miles to a charge, and you're getting half of that.
Depends on the day.
Yeah. It does, it has impact.
Literally.
Yeah. Thank you.
So just a quick follow-up, are we selling the electric buses to LA or just loaning them for the Olympics?
No. We're gonna ship those down. We're trying to ship those down there. And they would take over the federal share. So as Jack said earlier, 12-year life on the buses, the federal government owns 80% of that. So LA would assume that federal share, they would pay for the shipping down there, and that would come clean off of our hands.
The responsibility would go away.
Exactly. Exactly. That's how we're trying to. We've not gotten final word on that yet, but Mike and his team are working on it. Could we go back? There are no more questions. Could we go back to the slide that shows the projects that were completed? The 4 projects there. I just want to make a point, share a point with this body. Back one. There we go. So those projects are, Jack, what's the value of those projects in federal money? Eugene modernization was what, Joe? 4 million? 5 million. The operations command center was what?
13 million.
13, so we're at 17 million. The ITS video system replacement?
That one.
Okay, so we're at 8. And the fleet replacement?
10 right there.
Okay, so we're 28, $30 million, right? These are significant projects for the community. And I wanted to point out the magnitude of the cost, but also the value. So when you look at the Eugene Station modernization, it's not just a new building. It has features in it that allow folks with disabilities to be able to access services in a more convenient way. It also provides a space for our passengers to be a bit more comfortable and brings in features that had not existed there prior to help people navigate the system itself. On the Operations Command and Control Center, are we doing a tour after this?
We can, yeah.
Yeah, if you have a few minutes, I would recommend you take a look. Some of the studies that Amy Riker and her team do, they look at safety on our system. Safety at our station, safety waiting for a bus stop, safety on board. And what we found in terms of Eugene Station is it's one of the safer places downtown. We have our public safety presence there. We have a lot of buses coming in, which have 17 cameras on them each. A lot of times law enforcement, if something happens, they'll say, if you have a bus in your area, they'll come look at our cameras because we have roving cameras around the system. But with the Operations Command Center, when you look at that, you'll see a command center that can see every camera on the system, all the way from Commerce out west on MX into Springfield, our platforms, the lobby here. We have a team monitoring each of those. And when people talk about safety along transit, transit is one of the safest modes to use, but also these are really, when we say community investment plan and projects, these are real community investment projects because not only do they monitor our system, but they see beyond. And when we are able to collaborate with law enforcement as needed, it provides a magnifier on how we're able to provide public safety. So I wanted to point that out to this body that your approving of these types of projects goes beyond just our bus riders. It actually serves the community at large, and folks that will never ride our service benefit from that.
Thank you for pointing that out. This might be a good place to move to our long-range financial plan. Yeah, sorry if I skipped ahead of my brain. So please go ahead.
Well, and maybe I will talk about all of the numbers, but maybe I'll address that question during first. So I did highlight those cells on the page that shows where the reserves are. And for those of you who were involved in this meeting last year and last year's long-range financial plan, if you recall, our plan showed that we would be able to go basically the entire 10 years of the plan and still have enough reserves left in both our sustainable services reserve and also our working capital reserve to meet our goals, which is 2 months of operating expenses in each of those reserves. The new plan had to back that up a couple of years. So the red highlighted areas, those are the years where we do dip below our required 2 months of reserve. We're not out of money. That isn't what that means. So those negative numbers are not, like, okay, we're going to have an overdraft in our checking account. No, that's the difference between 2 months of operating costs and what we will have left at that point in time. So that's why I highlighted them, because it is different than last year, and I wanted everybody to be aware of that. And I was going to finish my comments by saying, I don't want to be a person to, just leave you with a gloomy outlook here, because the other way to say that is we have enough reserves to get us through almost 8 years. So that it's not as great as it was last year, but we're still in a really good spot, and we have lots of time to plan. And we will be working on lots of different tactics like fare management, looking at additional grant projects and support, looking at different things that we can do with STIF that also helps us out with operations and things. So there's a lot of options that we'll be looking at over the next 2 to 3 years to hopefully flatten that trend a little bit. So, okay. All right, so that's the
Thanks,
bottom line. So now I'll give you all the good details. Is Rihanna, can you go to our agenda page? All right, so tonight I'll talk about some key inputs, our trends, the long-range financial plan inputs are included in this, the charts that I'll show you tonight, and then a summary and outlook. Next slide. All right, our key inputs to the long-range financial plan. Obviously, we use the current year budget. We use also our historical actuals. And we do take a look at, of course, the CIP. And, you know, this year I looked mostly at the last 2 years. The couple, as you all know, the 3 years before that, you know, we had a pandemic going on, things were changing, and anything beyond maybe 5 or 6 years ago, you know, inflation has hit us so strongly in the last 5 years that I really just focused in on what did we actually do in the last 2 years, what is our budget for this next year, and then focused on what type of inflation factors do we want to use in each of these different areas. We look at our operating requirements. We've reviewed specific areas such as technology and contracted services. And we looked at the outside forces, what impacts those would have, such as the tariffs. And we have based our projections on that data as well as our historical internal data. Under staffing, current and historical and projected, we use the fiscal year 26 budgeted staffing levels and costs as a base. So the importance of that is that over the last 2 years, we have made a strategic decision to add additional operations staffing. There's 2 parts to that. One is getting plenty of operation buses that are operational and able to be on the streets, but we also have to have all of the people to take care of that. People to drive the buses, mechanics to take care of the buses. So we work with planning to come up with a target revenue hours that we are trying to meet, and what would it take in staffing to be able to get there. So you will see some increases in the personnel services, and that is directly related to our plan to add more service, and in order to do that, add more people in our operations areas. So the next one is tax revenues. We do use the Oregon Economic analysis that comes out during the year. There was one in May that we started looking at. The most recent one was September, and looking at the wage forecasts specifically. Our tax revenue forecasts are based on historical trends during economic upturns and downturns. And our rate, the LTD payroll tax rate that employers pay, has been increasing slightly each year since 2016, and it leveled out at 0.08% at the beginning of 2025. That's the last increase that has been legislatively approved. However, the actual rate increase makes up a relatively small portion of the additional tax we get each year. We've been trending about over 6%, between 6 and 7% increases year over year in our payroll taxes, and our actual rate increase only makes up about $700,000 of that. So our rates, or our taxes, are really based on what's going on in the wages locally and in the unemployment. And as you know, that's been, other than that dip in the pandemic era, that's been very strong the last couple of years. So we will carry that on, maybe at a little bit less, but we do see that our wages locally are still going to be growing. And then lastly, we use our operational data, and that's where revenue hours come in. And in this draft, we've adjusted the service data and operator staffing to match with our strategic business plan service metrics. And the operations data has been analyzed to identify specific cost and revenue relationships. And this information is used to project the impact of these service changes over each year. Okay, next slide. Other key inputs are short and long range plans, such as LTD 2.0, STIP, what's going on with that, fleet plans, and other local plans that we need to take into consideration from this. Although our long-range financial plan is primarily a financial document, we're careful to consider the impact from the other planning work that's in progress at the state level and then also locally. Most of you are aware that in the transportation bill that was passed recently, it included an increase in the STIP tax, temporary increase to that tax. We have just a very basic estimate of what that might be, but nothing really very concrete. So I did not include any of that in this long-range financial plan. So we will know in a couple of months whether we feel like that is going to be available to us or not. So stay tuned. In our March 31st meeting, hopefully we'll have a lot more information about that and be able to determine what's going to happen to our fiscal year 27. Another thing that we look at that is in our budget are transfers. So these are internal transfers from our general fund to our other programs and services. Well, you will see a change in the amount of transfer actually between fiscal year 24 and 25 when we're spending about $4 million a year supporting our other programs. And then that was reduced to less than $1 million a year by making up the difference with our STIP funding. So we are going to continue to assume that STIP funding will be available to support and it goes specifically towards our ADA operations to help support that in our Right Source program. The other thing that's a little different that I did this year is rather than trying to take our capital fund transfer to the projects that may or may not have funding yet, we would have to guess how much funding we think that we would get. I just capped our contribution from the general fund to the capital fund at $6.5 million a year. So that row, which used to go up and down and would cause some pretty big deficits in our operating, the net surplus or deficit. I evened that out. I did do a math, just a quick check to see how much in Jack's funding proposal total do we think that we'll be using over that 10 years. And our $6.5 million a year will more than adequately take care of that. And so I just felt like it's better to just have a target amount that we have that capped at. If for a particular year, we end up needing more than that, we do also have reserves that are in our capital fund. Part of our reserve policy is our working capital. Part of it is our sustainable services reserve. But we also have a policy that there's a minimum amount that we will keep in our capital projects fund at all times. So if there is a particular year that we need to fund over that $6.5 million, that's where we'll go first. And in that reserve, which isn't shown on here because the focus of the long-range financial plan is operating, that we have about 30 million in that our capital fund reserve. So I feel like that we have an adequate support to be able to do things that we need to do around here. All right, next slide. Okay, specifically to this plan year are the trends that we use. 3% inflation adjustments for materials and services. Healthcare costs max 5%. We used 7% last year. We actually used 7% for our budget. My thinking on that is the last 2 years, we have actually had health insurance costs that are less than the 7%. And I just literally checked today, we're in the middle of open enrollment right now. So I looked to see, okay, between 25 and 26, what is going to be our actual increase? And it's just slightly under 5%. So I felt okay with using 5% on our healthcare costs. We may have to change that in a year or two, but that is a little bit less than what we have been using in previous years. Our overall personnel services, I used an inflation factor of 5%, which is actually increased from 4% last year. When you take a look at our various ATU contracts, and we have 4 of them now, the actual increases built into either steps and or COLA of those contracts range from a minimum of about 5% up to 11% per year. And so you might look at 5% and say, oh, how are we going to be able to do that? And the answer to that is, as I mentioned before, we've been budgeting at a level that would allow us to put enough revenue service hours on the road that would actually be the same level of service we had pre-pandemic. We've been actively working toward that. Our goal of 50 operators hired in 2025, we met that goal. We'll also have that same goal this year. So compared to budget, then we have had unfilled positions. And then there's also, when you have turnover, there's times in between where you just don't have anybody in that position. And so the actual increases in our personnel services for that has been lower. It's been higher than 5%. You know, it's been more like about 7 or 8%, but I felt like that the operation side compared or combined with administration, that 5% would be a reasonable amount. And as I mentioned, it is higher than the 4% that we were using last year. So we have some federal assistance at 4.7 on our plan last year. We just pegged that at $4.7 million, which is approximately 50% of the formula funding that we're allowed to use for operations. Most of our formula funding is specifically for capital, which we then have to match, but there is a certain amount of it that we're allowed to use for operations. So this is not the maximum amount we could use. We could use up to 75% of that. This is about 50% of that. And what we've been using it for is to help hire all of those people and to ramp up to being able to add those services. I had an inflation factor of about 3%. And I took a look at what our actual formula funds have done over the last 10 years. And with a couple of exceptions, they've been between 2 and 3%. So I'm more confident looking at that into the future as well. STIP funding, I already mentioned that we also have STIP money, $4 million a year that we are using to also assist us to increase service. And that is built into this plan. And of course, the updated community and investment plan, our capital projects. changing trends between last year and this year, slowing inflation. It's nice to see a less inflation rate from 4 to 5% is now trending about 2 to 3% and closer to about 2.5% at the end of that's what they think that it will be at the end of the year. Technology costs are still rising. And of course, our aging fleet equipment, which means we have more parts and we need to have more mechanics, and it just causes a lot of issues by having our aging fleet out there. And then last thing, labor contracts. We negotiated over the last 2 years, we've been negotiated 4 additional ATU contracts. The main contract is set to expire in June of 2026. So we will be working on renegotiating that contract shortly after the first of the year. And so, okay, any questions on any of the trends?
Thank you for that presentation, Pam. And then Charlie.
Thank you, appreciate it. First off, kudos to you for pulling that out of your head. I know where your head's been lately, it's all just in your numbers, so nicely done. Great.
This is my one opportunity that I actually get to talk about.
So I got a couple of questions. The first one, if you could, at the outset, I'm in my head, I'm just trying to visualize the ratio between the payroll tax in the documents of what 73%, I think, of the general fund is payroll tax. And then how does that relate to the wage increases and the anticipation of bringing on staff? So, and I don't remember, remind me, are LTD employees PERS eligible?
No.
Okay.
We have
So you don't have to worry about a UAL or anything along those lines?
Right, but our retirement plan is very similar in cost. We actually did an analysis to see how our retirement plan compares to PERS, and it's very similar to that.
Okay. So in my head, I'm trying to visualize the payroll tax coming in and what you were saying about, wages, the labor wages out there, that more money's coming in, seems to be on a slight trend, if I remember what you had said correctly. But is LTD, other employee wages, going higher than that? And so what I'm trying to look at is long-term, I'll wrap it all up with this, is there a probability range to get to that 10-year line? So I'm used to, if you look at, stocks or stock markets, usually there's like a horizontal U-shaped probability curve. Is there anything along those lines? Because for me, and I think I brought this up last time, it's understanding the assumptions that we're making now. Why are we making them, and what benchmarks are coming from them? So if we don't reach those benchmarks 3 years from now, when are we going to pull that back and adjust that probability curve? So to me, I know that's a lot. So, but that's where my head is. I'm trying just to understand all of that as we go forward for that probability side of it and that relationship up front now, so that we've got a better, tighter window on that back in 10 years from now.
Well, and I don't have a complete answer for you today because we are, first of all, we just finished the long-range financial plan, but what you're describing is exactly what the chiefs will be working on as we put this next year's budget together. And looking for what do we need to put in place now so that over the next 2 years that we'll be able to sustain this. So one thing that I can point out that we've already done, we drew down the remainder of our COVID funds the beginning of fiscal year 25. I had originally planned to stretch that out over 4 or 5 years, but we were advised that we should, if we haven't drawn them down yet, we should draw them down. And so what that did in our fiscal year 25 operations was to actually free up some money because the federal COVID funds were targeted specifically for operations, and that's what you were supposed to be using them on. So we made an investment in our pension plans. Could you mention that? We paid down $6 million at the end of our fiscal year directly into our pension plans to pay down our future liability. And we just literally met, as our trustees met last week, and the result of that was our salary plan is now 92% funded. And our ATU plan is in the mid 80%. So if any of you were on the board 15 years ago, or 10, it was not that way. So we are, that's just an example of things that we're doing that will pay off in, 5, 10, 15 years in the future. And that's the kinds of things that we're going to be looking at and see if we can get some more of those to be able to invest in. And so, but that exactly what you're saying is on my mind, but we don't have that completely figured out yet.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yes, Gary.
To Charlie's point, she just needs a bigger garden.
Yes.
I'm amazed at how you analyze this, and it is really very impressive.
Oh.
To go to the level you have, and that was amazing. When I went through this and looked at it, I thought that's great. One question though is, there's a bonus for driving the long buses. $450. I assume that's an annual bonus, or or just a one-time bonus, or?
Okay, well, I don't know which one of you guys want to take that. It's kind of a substitute. So what the contract actually was that they wanted the MX drivers to be able to get more per hour. But we don't have a system. We're getting a new system. We don't have a system yet, and we can actually track exactly what hours and at what pay every driver has for every hour. So through some analytics and looking at, okay, what would the average about be? We negotiated with the union. Okay, well, let's just do $450 per person. And we know that there's some people that drive way more, some people that drive way less. And so in the next round of negotiations, we'll actually have the back end software to be able to calculate that. Did I explain that the right way, Mike?
It came up a few times a few years ago, and we worked really hard to everybody's a driver.
That's tied to MX specifically.
Yeah, no, I read that. Thank you.
So, okay, any other questions?
Any other questions for him? Give you a chance to think about it while I ask one more question. I was wondering, industry-wide, how do our personnel costs compare in terms of like rising or going down? Is the rest of the industry also experiencing increased personnel costs?
My understanding is yes. I don't know, Jameson, if you can.
Yeah, so we track that a couple of different ways. The big contract was 4 years ago. We had to catch up to market, and you saw 22% over 4 years. We don't anticipate that in the next go around. We use different reports. There's a report called the DASH report that looks at each of the contracts at transit properties across the nation, what the top wage is with operators and for fleet mechanics. And we'll use that as a guide to see what the trends are as we get closer to certifications.
And so where do we kind of fall in the industry?
So if you look at we're a member of the bus benchmarking group, American Bus Benchmarking Group. Within that group of peers, we're on the higher end. We'll take a look at this and send this out officially, but if we look at similar mid-sized properties across the nation, we'd probably be somewhere towards the upper middle. Yeah. And if you look at West Coast versus Midwest versus, then it all gets kind of wacky because of the different markets. So we can do a report on that the next we're sending out. So.
I know Gary was a big fan of it. It's the ABBG report. Is that what it is?
The American Bus Benchmarking Group.
We used to,
It's just kind of helpful to know where.
Well, it is, where your cost per rider, boarding on that kind of stuff.
Thanks. Any questions from anybody else?
You guys are on a roll. This is
Thank you.
Okay, well,
Thanks, Pam.
then I'll go quickly through the charts on these and, So we'll start at the top, which is the, and I'll, if you have the packet, this will be on page 5, the top chart on page 5. So the story about operating revenues is fair revenues are flat, that actually we didn't meet budget last year with the fair revenues. So we pulled down our expectations of our on fares. And we do have some increases in fair revenue because we are working on that. We talked about that a little bit earlier. But I pulled back on our anticipation in a lot of increases in fares. Advertising revenue, we took that out of our budget. We've now put that back in with renewed interest in having less advertising. It's not a large amount, but it's put back in there. Our special event services is basically at this time the Oregon Country Fair. That is what we receive from that is directly tied to operating costs to operate those routes. And so you'll see some increases in that. And then a slight decrease in our forecast service revenue hours. And I'm talking about specifically budgeted 24-25, that's the last line, the bottom line in on the revenues. It is actual our service hours. And the budget 24-25 compared to our actual 24-25, we were slightly below budget on that. So it adjusted our expectations a little bit on our service hours. So, okay, next slide. And so on our non-operating revenues, then we're showing payroll tax growth 3% to 5%. As I mentioned before, our actual rate of growth is higher than that, but just because, you know, all of the economic forecasts are that there'll be kind of a flattening, I pulled that down a little bit, and we pretty much talked about most of these already, other than sale of assets. So we talked a little bit about the River Road property. We also have the piece of property next to the Santa Clara station, the Hunsaker property, that we are currently in active negotiations with the YMCA, and they initially had offered $5 million for that property. You can see that that is, we put that in there in our long-range financial plan. Interest is interesting right now because if you're a mortgage person and wanting to buy a house, you're happy the interest rates are going down. If you're wanting to try to make more money on our reserves, then not as happy. And I've already seen just a small dip in what our interest rates went down on mid-October already. So I did pull those back a little bit. We've been trending in between, it's currently at about 4.5%. And that is money that is in the Oregon local government investment pool. So it can commingle with all the other cities and states and other monies. And so it's a very large pool. And the advantage of having it there is immediate access. I can literally ask them for a transfer of, $2 million, and it'll be in our account that day. There are other options that are available, but they're not as accessible. So that's a funding decision that we have made that, and we've done actually fairly well with that fund. So for a very safe fund. Okay, next. Now, here's our requirements. So we already talked about personnel services, including our service increases. We're using our budget, fiscal year 26 budget, FTE, and personnel service costs plus 5% per year. Materials and services at 3%. And then insurance and risk, the only thing I wanted to add on our insurance and risk services is that just like everybody else, we saw a large increase in our insurance costs between 23 to 25, 40% is how much our property and liability insurance went up. I don't anticipate that much of an increase. It was less last year between, 24 and 25. Hopefully it'll be less this year. And included in that section is also our workers' comp and our Oregon paid leave insurance. So our Oregon paid leave, we are allowed to do an alternative method. Most employers, the employee pays a portion, employer pays a portion of that. We negotiated with the ATU that LTD would pick up 100% of that, so the employees don't have to pay their portion. But in order for us to do that, we actually purchased insurance for that, just like when you buy health insurance. So we pay a premium, and then with Standard, and then Standard takes care of paying out the Oregon paid leave in accordance with that law. So that was the new thing in the last 2 years that was added to the insurance and risk services. So I've used 5%, might not end up being enough, but for these purposes, that's the number that I landed on. So, okay, next slide should be our transfers. And we already spent time talking about the transfers. That for our ADA services, they go directly to support RideSource. And one, you might wonder on the point-to-point program, that transfer isn't very large, but it does drop off to nothing after a couple of years. The reason is that those grants that are included, we do have a timeline on those, and we are trying to get those spent down. Jack's been working really hard to get a plan and to work with the FTA on extending some of those deadlines. So we do plan to get those completed in the next couple of years. Our van pool program will be continuing on, but there's enough reserves in that fund to fund our van pool for several years. So sustainable services, you'll see when we get to the reserves page, you'll see that we are planning to use some of our sustainable services in the out years, but we are continuing to try to make but we are contributing at least some every year back into that fund. And that was paid originally at $300,000 a year, and I just left it at that amount. And then we already talked about the capital reserves. So, okay. Go to, okay, this is the bottom line page that will show our summary of where we are year to year. So you will see in the row you want to be looking at is the one that says total RPB revenues minus total requirements of QMTS. This which should be on page 6. So there is a lot of up and down. You'll see a lot of negative numbers on that line. I tried to peg it to about $4 million a year. That $4 million is what we are using our unrestricted working capital. So those of you that were here last year for our discussion, we talked about how many months that we had available in our unrestricted working capital, and we have quite a balance built up. So most of that $4 million is coming directly out of our working capital. And when there wasn't enough to take it directly out of there, then I went to the Sustainable Services Fund. So you can see on the the bottom line, and then if I could direct your attention up to just above the line that says total revenue under the revenue section. So there is a line that says transfer from Sustainable Services Reserve. Let me know if you found that. Did everybody see that? Okay, so transfer from Sustainable Services Reserve. That's the money coming from our Sustainable Service Reserve back into the general fund to help support our operations. And the combination of those two is how we get down to, over the period of 10 years, is how we get to the spots where that I have highlighted in red, or in the out years, starting in a little bit in year 7, but with year 8 and 9 for sure, that we do need to work internally on a plan here to sometime over the next 7 years, we will be working on that to make sure that we will continue to keep our 2 months minimum in both of those reserves that we'll be able to use. So, okay, any other questions?
Yeah, I've got Charlie and Charlie.
All right, thank you. So the ABBG report that you mentioned earlier, does that have a theoretical maximum amount of revenue for the system? And then does it also break it down into a realistic maximum? And I ask that, so with Lane County Parks, I always looked at our occupancy rates for our campgrounds, right? If we're occupied 100% of the time, what's our maximum that we could ever achieve? And then really what should we expect to achieve and to figure out those. So that's what I'm looking at. Is there a way, because the concern, thought, information that I'm looking for is that for the reserve, starting in the 26-27 forecast, every year, just looking at the top, now it goes up. So that means every year you're setting a record, unless LTD has generated more revenue than that previously back in the pre-COVID era. So every year is going to be a new revenue record. That creates red flags and concerns for me going forward. That's why I'm looking at, okay, what is the theoretical maximum? What is the practical industry standard that you can expect? And how close are we to that? Because some of what I've heard from, unless I've misunderstood it, more staff, more buses, trying to get this with more service, more, get the term, the revenue hours, I think is the metric. How does all this shape up into these numbers, and what can we actually expect? Again, to get back to that probability curve, and what are our assumptions, and what are our red lines for our benchmark, and so we know that, yeah, we're not going to meet it, we've got to take more drastic action.
Right, and so, well, to answer your question about how our reserves, how do we get to that place? And when we're seeing the reserves going up down here, what's happening to make that happen? So when we budget, as I mentioned before, we budget full staff, 215 operators, maximum, there are mechanics that we need to have. And we've done that now. This will be coming up, this will be our 3rd year that we budgeted at that level. And then we looked at, okay, do we have revenues to be able to sustain that? Okay, at this point, we do, without it being reserves. And what has happened for 3 years in a row, we have not spent that much money. So if you want a lot of fun and you want to come in February and listen to our auditors and give their report, you'll be able to see that we have actually had surpluses, bottom line surpluses on our audited statements. But that was mostly because we budgeted for revenue to fill every position and spend every dollar that we thought we would budget in, and we didn't need to. We didn't spend that much. And so, but I agree with you. That's going to be temporary because we are going to eventually be able to fill all of those positions. And the cost increases are going to continue to catch up with that. At what point do, like the lines cross, this is just a plan based on specific assumptions. Any one of those could change, and specific to our payroll, because that does support so much of our operations is our payroll tax. Though that is directly related to what's happening in wages and what's happening in employment in our county. And so the best that I feel like we can really do is work about 2 to 3 years out, and even that, we could have, something major happen in the stock market and things go bad. But this is, like I said, this is the plan based on a certain set of assumptions. Where the pencil really hits the paper is when we do our annual budget. that's when we really dig into, okay, what are realistic expectations for the next year? And then we kind of keep an eye on the next year after that. So I don't know if that completely answered your question, but I don't have a magic number to be able to tell you, okay, we need to go back to legislature and ask for 5% more in our payroll tax, too many other variables.
So we wouldn't get that from the bus benchmarking.
Okay.
There some of the characteristics of the systems are a little different there. I think, developing peer groups, I'm not sure, do we use peer groups in our planning? We're looking at peer systems.
We have in the past, yeah.
Yeah, so we could look at, probably won't get to what you're looking for, but we could look at peer systems in terms of size and service area characteristics that look at their operating performance metrics. What's their cost per revenue hour? What's their fare per revenue mile as well? And benchmark against that. I still don't think it gets to what you're exactly asking for.
No, and at Parks, I never got to what I was asking for as well, so it's just industry standards out there and try to get some PhD to do the right economic research would be awesome. But, even if that's something you look at for Eco Northwest, contract out to get some of those numbers, particularly because anytime you're starting to rely on reserves, that's not a sustainable model. And so something has to happen. And I go to, particularly with the budgets and the complex dynamic systems, today is better to change it than tomorrow, and tomorrow is better than the day after. But if there's something that we can do now, and particularly as we, a few months from now, when we get to looking at the budget, what can we actually do now so that those reds aren't going to be as red? Maybe they're pink.
I appreciate that.
Well,
Thank you for making this clear.
Well, and the other thing that I would like to point out about reserves is that in a, for-profit business model, you want a surplus every year, and you build up your reserves and your capital and your value of your business, and it works out that way. But we're a government. If we have more reserves than what would be normally considered the right amount of reserves, which we've decided 2 months of operating expenses in each one, we have dollars that we should be putting to use. And so we have built up reserves over the last couple of years, for a variety of reasons. I'm pretty motivated to try to have a plan to put those dollars to work for us, and it's not that it's bad to have 6 or 8 or even a year's worth of reserves. It's just when you have a responsibility to the public and you're using their funds, you should be putting those to work for the public. So this long-range financial plan is put together with that in mind as well. So.
Appreciate it. So at Lane County, when we did this, our carryover, we tried for 2 to 3% variance, so that our revenues were pretty close. We tried to keep it tight, and our assumptions were pretty tight. And then the county policy was that any carryover balance never went to operational, it went to capital projects. And that way you don't start to develop that need of operational, and then you start hiring staff with reserves, because then again, that is a bad trend going forward. At some point in time, you have to pay the piper. So that's why we went to discrete one-time funding for any capital project end of year carryover.
Yeah, that we could definitely consider adding that to our reserve policy. Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion.
I don't know if this goes to what Charlie was asking, but would it be, I think we talked about this, this was a long time ago, before UPAM, where we talked about different ways to approach making assumptions and forecasts, but I was just doing quick calculations. I think this is assuming about 7% ridership growth, essentially. Would that be about right? More or less?
Yeah, I'd have to know for sure.
Would it be?
I just know our target was the 279,800 revenue hours.
And I wouldn't mind, I'm not suggesting that we do this, but just asking the question about if using a flat growth projection would be appropriate. It's just as a way to look at it, or compare reasons. I would want to make you do it if it was more, well, obviously it's more work, but is that it? Do other people, agencies use that as a way to kind of look at a different scenario?
So you're thinking flat growth because each line has kind of its own thing going on,
Yeah.
you know, so you're thinking flat growth in revenue.
Right, so that the revenue is.
Yeah, we have our planners kind of specializes in that. And he's done a lot of work in looking at our system, looking at how many operators it takes to run a certain number of hours on our system. And that's where these numbers are coming from. And if you notice that at the point that we get to our 279,000 number, anyway, that we do basically flatline it, and that is directly related to that was his estimate of the maximum amount of service that we could put on the road with our current fleet and our current operators.
And I think that's what you're referring to, Charlie, right?
Yeah,
So,
that's it. That's the number. And then we run the analytics in the background to say, okay, how much per revenue hour is it costing us to do that? And are we in our, is our the costs that we're estimating, are they within what we think it should cost us per revenue hour?
which I imagine is insanely difficult because people can stand on buses, so you can't do it by seat. So
Yeah.
you're still taking guesses.
Yes. And, fairs have been really interesting for me to watch here because, I came in right at the time the pandemic was starting, and you can look back and you can see that there's a nice trend up in ridership and fairs, and things were, humming along. And especially if you look back 15 years ago now, when MX was coming online, big increases there, but that just really has not come back at all after the pandemic, and flat at best, and really the only growth that we've had in that area is in our group pass sales. So going out to businesses and talking to them about buying passes for their employees. And so that's part of the reason we have such we're studying and we have an emphasis on fairs right now, where we want to look and understand that better.
Yeah, because it's not a one-for-one. So we have automatic people calendars on vehicles. We also capture them at the fare box on our fixed route system. But when you factor in the fares, you can ride as much as you want with the monthly pass. So it's not a one-to-one count. We have been, Mike's team has been doing a good job on looking at fare evasion. MX, MX is designed as a rail system on wheels, all for ticketing and the like. So really checking, doing the fare validations and seeing how that is impacting ridership. The other piece we'll be looking at is in the ride source area. We're doing a financial analysis of that area right now. And then we'll follow that up with an operational analysis. That is important work that we're doing in that space. Is one of the gems that this organization has is how we the intent of that service, but we do want to make sure that it's operating as efficiently as possible. So we'll be undertaking that probably once the financial analysis is done. We'll be going in to discuss an operations analysis of that area as well. And again, that is a smaller percentage of our overall ridership, but the higher cost per trip. And we see that number continue to grow, and complicating that is the talk at the state level with Medicaid. So we have two CCOs in the area, well, one CCO in the area now, and the experience with the existing CCO is that our reimbursement rate has been historically lower. So we're looking at the cost of that as well. So a few things for us to keep our eye on in terms of revenue. I know we talk a lot about requirements on the revenue side. There's some analysis for us to do. And then finally, I don't know when the last time we had a fare increase actually was. We talked about inflation quite a bit. We have not talked about fare increase. We're assessing that in the mix with everything else. But we want to make sure that, part of being responsible with taxpayer money is collecting, the value of what you're supposed to collect. So we want to assess what that number is that we should collect, and then make sure that we're doing all the efforts to collect that as well.
Thanks, Jameson. And thanks for reminding us that ridership and fare collection are not a fixed ratio. So it's a good thing to remember. Great. Okay, any other questions for Pam?
I have some comments to make.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, and Jameson, thank you because I had rideshare on here. And rideshare is a gem, and it provides a level of flexibility with your other requirements for Medicaid. That LTD has done a really good job utilizing that to be cost effective. And so that's great, but I can see if those rates drop, because one of our goals is always to have that to be a break even. As close as possible. And the other thing I would mention is when you do your budget on your paint booth, I'd like Pam to approve it.
She approved pay and spend here.
Because I gotta admit that I would look really, really close at that, because I think there's more risk than you're thinking. And bringing that in-house would be something I'd study really, really hard.
Okay, appreciate it. Yeah. Thank you. Good. Any final comments or questions? Thank you very much, Pam.
Welcome. Yeah, no decisions tonight need to be made, right?
I believe that is all that's the final item right. So I think we're at conclusion. Anything? Oh, Joe, was there?
So no, one decision, whether you want to go on a tour with the project manager of this facility.
We have to approve it. Is there any?
Okay, this is all just draft.
Perfect. Yes. Great. So yes. So for all those interested, actually, would you like just to see if our hand raised, so just see who is interested in the tour?
So stick around. We'll take you for a tour.
Okay. I think there's a lot of interest, so we'll go ahead and do that. So with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn. And thank you very much, everyone. Darvin. Oh, sorry, Darvin. Just in case, was there any question or comment you would like to make?
No questions. Thanks.
No problem. Great. Well, with that, then meeting adjourned.